It is a name that has echoed for 500 years, a whisper that became a fever, a legend of a place so rich it drove men to the very edge of madness and beyond. El Dorado, the lost city of gold. For centuries it was believed to be a real place, a kingdom of unimaginable wealth hidden in the uncharted heart of South America. But the true story of El Dorado is not about a city. It is about a man, a ritual, and a sacred lake high in the mountains of the Andes. Our story begins before the arrival of Europeans, with the Muisca people, a sophisticated civilization that flourished in what is now modern-day Colombia. For the Muisca, gold was not a currency to be hoarded. It was a sacred metal, a physical manifestation of the sun's divine energy. And the most important Muisca ritual involved gold in a truly spectacular fashion. A ceremony to appoint a new chief, a new leader for the people. The chosen heir would undergo a long period of purification, fasting in a cave, isolated from the world. When the time came, he was brought to the lake. His body was coated with a sticky layer of tree resin. Then, using hollow reeds, the priests would blow fine, pure gold dust all over him until he was completely covered. He had become El Dorado, the Gilded Man, a living offering to the gods, shining like the sun itself. He and a few high priests would then board a ceremonial raft laden with golden offerings and precious emeralds. The raft was then pushed out, gliding silently towards the exact center of the sacred lake. At the center, a signal was given. The crowd on the shore would turn their backs to the lake as a sign of respect for the privacy of the gods. In the sacred silence, El Dorado, the Gilded Man, would cast the treasures into the water as an offering. Then came the final act. He himself would dive into the lake, washing the sacred gold dust from his body. His golden skin, a gift from the people, was now returned to the goddess of the lake, completing the offering. When he emerged from the water, he was no longer an offering. He was the new chief, accepted by the gods. This was the true El Dorado, a man, a ritual, a lake full of gold, a story of spiritual devotion. But this story, passed in whispers from one tribe to another, was about to be heard by new ears. Ears that did not hear a tale of sacred duty, but only one thing: the intoxicating whisper of gold. The arrival of the Spanish Conquistadors in the 16th century was a cataclysm for the peoples of South America. They were driven by a trinity of motives: God, glory, and above all, a consuming, insatiable lust for gold. And as they conquered, they heard the stories. Rumors of a native king so rich, he covered himself in gold. In the minds of the conquistadors, a ritual about a man was transformed into a legend of a place. If a king could cover himself in gold, surely he must rule from a city made of gold. The logic was simple, seductive, and completely wrong. And so the search began. Expeditions of desperate men pushing into the jungles, the swamps, and the mountains, searching for a city that never was. The jungle was a relentless enemy. The heat was suffocating. The armor, a cooker. The insects, a constant torment. Food ran out. The men were reduced to eating their horses, their leather belts, and things unimaginable. And then came the diseases of the jungle. Malaria, dysentery, yellow fever. The invisible enemies were the deadliest of all. They were also not alone.
The jungle had its own people who saw these strange armored men not as gods, but as invaders. The encounters were often brutal and swift, a hail of silent arrows from an unseen enemy, followed by a terrifying ambush. The Spaniards' guns were powerful, but slow to reload. In the close quarters of the jungle, they were often no match for the local speed and knowledge of the terrain. Yet through all this suffering, the fever of gold drove them on. Every native they captured was asked the same obsessive question, and the local tribes, desperate to get these violent strangers to leave their lands, often gave them the answer they wanted to hear. They told them, yes, El Dorado is real. It is just over the next mountain range, just across the next great river. The legend became a weapon used by the indigenous people to send their tormentors deeper and deeper into the green hell, to their doom. One of the first and most tragic of these great expeditions was led by the German conquistador Ambrosius Ebinger. In 1529, he pushed into the interior, his quest for El Dorado becoming a byword for cruelty. After 3 years of wandering and finding nothing but misery, his dwindling party was ambushed. He would die a slow, agonizing death from the poison, his dream of gold turning to dust in a land he had only terrorized. But the failure of one expedition did not kill the legend. It only made it stronger. The stories claimed the previous explorers had looked in the wrong place, that they had not been brave enough, or that they had been cursed. And so another doomed expedition would set out, funded by merchants and blessed by priests, following the phantom city ever deeper into the continent. One of the largest was led by Gonzalo Pizarro, the brother of the conqueror of the Inca. In 1541, he marched out of Quito with a force that seemed invincible, heading east into the Amazon basin, the land of cinnamon and gold. But the jungle did not respect armies. Within weeks, the expedition was in tatters, starving and lost. Desperate, Pizarro sent his second-in-command, Francisco de Orellana, downriver on a makeshift boat to find food. Orellana never returned. He and his men, swept along by the current, would become the first Europeans to travel the entire length of the Amazon River. But Pizarro and the men he left behind were doomed. After waiting in vain, they were forced to walk back. Of the 4,000 native porters who began the journey, none survived. Of the 200 Spaniards, only 80 staggered back into Quito 2 years later, a living testament to the terrible power of the myth. The horrifying failure of Pizarro's grand expedition should have killed the legend of El Dorado forever, but the fever was too strong. The stories that reached Europe were not of misery and death, but of incredible riches just beyond reach, inspiring a new generation of seekers. The most famous of these was the English courtier, poet, and adventurer, Sir Walter Raleigh. Raleigh believed El Dorado was not in Colombia, but was a great empire called Manoa, located on the shores of a vast inland lake. In 1595, he sailed to South America. He did not plunge into the jungle like the Spanish, but explored the great Orinoco River by boat. He never found his golden city, but his journey produced something almost as valuable, a map and a book. Raleigh's obsessive quest for El Dorado would ultimately lead to his own ruin and execution. But his stories cemented the legend in the European mind for another 2 centuries. The search continued, a catalog of failure and death. Thousands of lives were lost chasing a phantom, a story that had been twisted beyond all recognition. But in the 19th century, the nature of the quest began to change. The age of the conquistador was over. The age of the scientist had begun.
Men like
so the
Humboldt
water,
were not looking
it
for a city
rises
of
with the
gold.
moon.
They were looking for the
We
truth.
offer thanks
They
to
interviewed
the
local
mountain
peoples,
spirits.
studied their languages, and recorded their real histories. It was through this scientific and anthropological work that the original Muisca ritual was rediscovered, and the legend
Yes,
of El Dorado
this is
was
the
finally
source.
traced back to its source.
But even with the truth revealed, the lure of real gold in the lake was too strong for some to resist.
The project was a disaster. The mud at the bottom of the lake was too soft and deep. When the water was gone, the mud baked into a concrete-like surface. They found a few gold trinkets, worth only a fraction of the immense cost of the project. The lake had guarded its secrets. Today, the lake has refilled. The Colombian government has declared it a protected site, preserving its history and its mystery. And so El Dorado has completed its final transformation. From a man to a city to a fool's quest, and now to a protected piece of cultural heritage. The story of
In
El
this
Dorado
ritual,
is
the
a
new
powerful
Zipa would
lesson in
cover
how
himself in
history
gold
is made
dust and embark
and
on a
how it can be
ceremonial
misunderstood. It shows how a genuine story, rooted in a specific culture and a sacred belief, can be distorted by the desires of another. The Muisca saw gold as a spiritual offering, a way of maintaining balance with the cosmos.
The Europeans saw it as a commodity, a source of personal wealth and national power.
It is a story of a fatal clash of worldviews, a collision of the sacred and the profane. And it serves as a powerful cautionary tale about the destructive power of obsession. The Golden City was a mirage, but the fever it induced was real, and it redrew the map of a continent. Today, the legend lives on, not as a target for explorers, but as a powerful metaphor for an ultimate prize, a final goal, a golden dream. The Gilded Man is gone. The city of gold never was. But the quest for El Dorado, it seems, is a journey that never truly ends.
So why does a story, proven to be a myth, still hold such power? Why do we continue to chase phantoms?
Perhaps it is because the legend of El Dorado is not just about gold. It is about the human belief in a world beyond our own. A belief that somewhere, beyond the next river, or over the next mountain, lies a place of perfection. This is the power of myth. It is a map not of the world as it is, but of the world as we wish it could be. The Conquistadors' failure was that they tried to find this spiritual map in the physical world. They mistook a sacred ritual for a treasure chest. But the Muisca people who created the story did not vanish. Their descendants still live in the highlands of Colombia. And for them, Lake Guatavita is not a lost source of treasure, but a living connection to their history, their identity, and their spiritual world. The true treasure of El Dorado was never the gold that was thrown into the lake. It was the story itself, a story of a people's relationship with the divine, a story of social order, and a story of humanity's unending search for meaning. The city of gold was a lie, born of a misunderstanding. But the legend it created tells us a profound truth. It tells us that the maps to our most sought-after treasures are rarely found in the physical world,
But in the stories we tell, the myths we create, and the sacred beliefs that give our lives meaning.
The legend of El Dorado is not, in the end, a story about the Muisca people, or even about the Spanish Conquistadors.
It is a story about the enduring power of myth itself, how a single powerful idea can shape the course of history. It reminds us that we are all, in some way, guided by the maps of our imagination, and that our greatest discoveries are often not the ones we set out to find, but the ones we find by accident along the way. The fever left scars,
not only on the minds of men, but etched into the very earth. Yet, the land has its own way of remembering and healing.
The conquistadors believed gold was a measure of power. They failed to understand its true weight, the weight of the lives it cost and the histories it erased. But in the stories we tell, the myths we create, and the sacred beliefs that give our lives meaning,
The Gilded Man is gone. The city of gold never was. But the human quest for a world more perfect than our own never ends.
The treasure was not a place to be found, but a story to be told. A story of faith, of greed, of madness, and of survival.
it is a story that ultimately belongs to the Muisca, the people who survived the fever of gold to reclaim their sacred lake.
A story that reminds us that some treasures are not meant to be possessed, but only to be honored. The shadow of gold has faded, revealing a truth that is quieter, more complex, and far more precious. A truth that lies not in a city of gold, but in the enduring spirit of a people and the sacred silence of a mountain lake.
The true history of the Muisca ritual was eventually pieced together by science, but the myth of a golden city proved far more resilient.
Because the legend of a lost city is a universal human dream, a story we seem compelled to tell ourselves again and again.
It speaks to a deep-seated hope that somewhere a perfect, untouched world exists, a place free from the hardships of our own reality. The conquistadors' tragedy was that they tried to conquer this dream with swords, to possess a spiritual treasure with physical force.
They left behind a legacy of destruction, not just of people, but of knowledge. Countless stories and histories of the indigenous peoples were lost forever. The true gold of the New World was not its metal, but its vast diversity of cultures, each with a unique way of seeing the world.
The quest for El Dorado, in its greed, trampled a human treasure far greater than any city of gold.
Yet, the descendants of these cultures endure. Today, there is a powerful movement across South America to reclaim these lost histories. Archaeologists now work not as conquerors, but as partners, using new technology to help indigenous communities uncover their own past. The search for lost cities continues, but today it is a search for knowledge, not gold. A quest to fill in the blank spaces on the map of human history. And what of Lake Guatavita, the heart of the legend? It remains a silent witness to the entire saga. The gold that remains in its depths is now protected not by priests, but by law. Its value is recognized as historical, not monetary. The fever has broken. The story has been reclaimed. The Gilded Man can finally rest. The legend of El Dorado is not a true story, but it tells us a truth, that the human heart will forever be drawn to the horizon, and that the most valuable treasures we find are not always made of gold, but of the knowledge and understanding we gain along the way. The search for El Dorado left scars on a continent and on history itself, scars that are only now beginning to heal. It is a reminder that a story can be a dangerous thing, a fever that can drive men to madness. But a story can also be a tool for understanding, a bridge to the past, and a source of enduring identity. The gold remains in the lake. The city remains in the realm of dreams. But the true El Dorado, the story of a people and their sacred world, is no longer lost. It has been found again in the memories of the descendants, in the patient work of scholars, and in the quiet dignity of the land itself. The failure of the conquistadors left a void,
not just in their treasuries, but on the map itself. The mythical city, once so real in their minds, had evaporated.
But a place is never truly empty. The land itself remembered the truth, holding the memory of the sacred ritual long after the gold seekers had gone.
The golden fever was a madness of its time, but the psychology behind it is timeless. The belief in a single discovery that will solve everything.
Today, the quest for treasure in the Amazon continues, not for a city of gold, but for the resources that power our own world: oil, timber, and minerals.
But now, new explorers are searching the jungle, not to extract, but to understand and preserve.
And the name El Dorado has been fully absorbed into our global culture, a brand name for luxury, detached from its violent and sacred origins.
But what of the Muisca people themselves, the very source of the legend? They were not erased by the fever they inadvertently caused. They remind us that true wealth is not a metal to be dug from the ground, but a living culture passed down through generations.
The myth of El Dorado tells us far more about the dreams and desires of 16th century Europe than it does about the reality of Muisca life.
It is the perfect example of how a story, once told, takes on a life of its own, often eclipsing the truth it was born from.
The search for El Dorado left scars on a continent and on history itself, scars that are only now beginning to heal.
It is a reminder that a story can be a dangerous thing, a fever that can drive men to madness. But a story can also be a tool for understanding, a bridge to the past, and a source of enduring identity. What was once a legend, whispered by invaders, is now a history, spoken with pride by the descendants of its creators.
The fever of gold has broken, but the spirit of the story, in its truest form, endures.
It is a powerful reminder that history is not a simple story of winners and losers, but a complex tapestry of survival, adaptation, and the enduring power of a people to keep their story alive.
The Golden City was a mirage that led to ruin, but the real story is a landmark that guides a people home.
It teaches us that a myth can be a dangerous weapon or a source of profound wisdom. It all depends on who is telling the story. The gold remains in the lake. The city remains in the realm of dreams. But the true El Dorado, the story of a people and their sacred world, is no longer lost.
It has been found again in the memories of the descendants, in the patient work of scholars, and in the quiet dignity of the land itself.
The fever has broken. The shadow of gold has faded, revealing a truth that is quieter, more complex, and far more precious.
And so we see that a myth is a mirror. What we seek in the unknown often reveals more about ourselves than the thing we are seeking. The conquistadors looked into the heart of a continent and saw only a reflection of their own desire for gold. The Muisca looked into the same lake and saw a reflection of their cosmos, a gateway to the sacred.
The legend of El Dorado is not, therefore, a history of a place, but a history of perception.
A story that proves that the greatest discoveries are not of new lands, but of new ways of seeing. And a reminder that the most precious gold is the truth.